Europe in the year 2014. Most EU states are still suffering from the effects of the financial and economic crisis. It's a paradox. There's a crisis, however, it's not always the Social Democrats who benefit, but its political opponents. In Europe, the Conservatives rule the majority. The Social Democrats, on the other hand, are trying to find their way. How can people believe we are the answer? On the contrary, they think we've ruined their lives. And that coming from a party that actually stands up for the weak, for the victims of capitalism. Nevertheless, social democracy is unable to benefit from the crisis. It's also about changing society. Winning elections is not enough. I go on a journey of discovery across Europe. There are many people like me who embrace left-wing concepts, but not the SPD. What are the Social Democrats doing wrong? Today it looks like social democracy is in danger of becoming extinct. This has reached a dimension that we simply could not have imagined in the past. Autumn 2013. I'm on my way to the Ruhr district, to the heart of the German SPD, where they should actually have a home advantage. Bochum constituency candidate is Axel Schäfer, who is also deputy chairman of the SPD. This way, please. Here you go. A little present for the upcoming election. That's me. A little present for the upcoming election. That's me. In my opinion, Schäfer is the typical German social democrat. A former civil servant in his early 60s, ordinary and always has the SPD's tradition firmly in focus. Yet, since he joined the party over 40 years ago, the SPD has suffered an unprecedented downfall. We could never have imagined that in normal times, I mean, without being in a state of emergency, without civil war or a meltdown, that a party that does its job loses half of its members, without there being a scandal like corruption or anything else. We just could not imagine this. Half of the SPD voters have left the SPD, some of them for no man's land, and some of them for other parties.
Ins Niemandsland, teilweise zu irgendeiner anderen Partei hin.
The campaigners are bravely bucking the trend, well aware that they have to contend with their supporters' memories and the fact that they blame the SPD for the cuts in social services and new poverty. Keywords are German Agenda 2010 and Hartz 4. We're not punishing you because of the Grand Coalition. It was already before that when Schröder started all that with Hartz 4. That's when you lost the voters. Yes, but Hartz 4 was in 2003 and the elections were in 2005. You have to work on your image. The SPD is too quiet. So, first of all, we voted against the CDU on many things. And secondly, we have made corrections regarding legislation to make up for previous mistakes. The question is whether the voters realize this. No, you have to understand. I grafted for 40 years, put money aside for later, and then found myself in a dilemma where I had to go to the job center and then take Hartz 4 a year later, where I had to disclose my assets, everything I'd saved for so hard for my old age. I think it's disgusting. And then I had to move into a smaller apartment. And you know what? It was degrading. I have to say, I really have to say, it's degrading. Agenda 2010. In 2003, under pressure from increasing unemployment levels, the German government under SPD Chancellor Gerhard Schröder voted on a comprehensive reform which led to drastic social cuts. Schröder's radical measures reduced state benefits and made the labor market more flexible. Germany had given in to the pressure of globalization, and this is still the case today. You know what? It's as if we've gone full circle, back to what our grandfathers fought for. I've been in the union almost 60 years. Everything we achieved, we've destroyed again. What with low wages and everything else they're doing, I voted SPD until Schröder messed things up. I can't vote for you anymore. I'm being completely honest, I can't vote for you anymore. Compared to many European countries, Germany is in good economic shape on the whole. Yet, the divide between the rich and the poor has become ever wider. Most Germans feel their country is being unjust, and the SPD and its reforms are amongst those being held responsible. I think the reason why social democracy is experiencing such difficulties, particularly among its former base voters, is the fact that it has given up its core belief, with which it was always associated, and has always been the main purpose of social democracy, namely protecting the weak and vulnerable members of society. Back then, in the late 90s, Schröder was a trendsetter. Not only he, but other European social democrats were trying to disassociate themselves from the boring Labour Party image. The new strategy was the third way. This concept failed for many in Germany. Evidently, it also severely damaged the SPD's identity. But perhaps that's just typically German. I make my way to the country which, based on my research, went down the path of the third way more persistently. Great Britain.
Great music.
You're invited.
Great shopping. Great museums.
To me, the island has always stood for sportsmanship, open-mindedness,
You're invited.
trendiness, and of course, bad food.
Great cities.
You're invited.
2012 is a great year to be in Britain. And you're invited.
The British have traditionally favored a less regulated market economy. The heart of the European financial market can be found in London's banking district. I want to know how the Labour Party coped with the third way concept. In British Parliament, I meet long-serving Labour MP Alan Johnson. As former British Home Secretary, Minister for Education and Minister for Health, he advocated his party's third way policy from the outset.
Well, I was a postman. In truth, my dilemma on the left was whether to go further left or whether to join the Labour Party. I decided the Labour Party was the only realistic way of changing society for the better. They were capable of winning an election. They represented most of the things I believed in, including parliamentary democracy. And I've been a member for 40-odd years now.
Back to the base. Alan Johnson brings me along with him to Luton, an industrial city north of London. The local Labour Party has invited him as the guest of honour.
Very well, yeah. Hi, Bill. You're my introduction, are you? Yeah, great. You're all right. 8 o'clock. Yeah, got you.
To hear from our very special guest, the Right Honourable Alan Johnson MP. Alan Johnson.
I was a postman before I was actually an official with the union. And I just wanted to say a true story about why I stopped being a postman. I went to deliver, it's an absolutely true story, to this big house in Hedgeley in Bucks. I was based at Slough. And it was a long gravel drive and beautiful manicured lawns. And I banged on the door with this parcel, and this woman opened the door, opened the window of the bathroom, and this dog at the same time ran round the side and was attacking me. And this woman, she said, "Kick his balls." Just kick his balls. So I'm trying to negotiate this. And she said, "No, not those ones, you silly man, the plastic ones on the lawn." I kind of thought there must be a better way to earn a living.
Johnson's better way to earn a living was with the union. As union boss and later leading party member, he was involved in Labour's radical transformation.
It was actually 2010. Well, you have to go back when we lost power in 1979. We became virtually unelectable. Our slogan seemed to be no compromise with the electorate. And you have to remember, we ended the 70s as the only country in Europe that didn't have any basic minimum standards set, whether it's for annual holidays, whether it's for minimum wage, whatever. We had no mechanism for that at all.
This consequently led to the iconic figure of the British Conservative Party taking over power in 1979.
I stand before you tonight in my red star chiffon evening gown, the Iron Lady of the Western world.
Margaret Thatcher turned the country upside down, concentrated on a widely deregulated market and a lean state. As a result of Thatcher's efforts, Great Britain pioneered in neoliberal economic policy.
There was a large strand of the Labour Party, not a majority, but a large strand that believed that the answer to Thatcher and the victory of the Conservatives in the 70s and then their re-election was to move further to the left. And many others, me included, who felt that the answer to this was for us to move further to the centre. So along came Tony Blair and others in the 1990s and said, well, there is a third way through this. And it's probably the recognition we are not an anti-capitalist party. We want to ensure that the worst excesses of the capitalist economy and the markets are governed and regulated for the benefit of everyone, but we believe in those markets.
As Britain approaches the end of the century, we have been with the same masters now for 18 years. We still have the talent, skills, and inventiveness that we've always had, probably more so. But in a rapidly changing world, we seem somehow to have lost our sense of purpose. Give Tony Blair your mandate on May the 1st, and let him give Britain back its sense of purpose.
First came the success. In 1997, so-called New Labour succeeded in reversing the tide, bringing with it its new salvation. Tony Blair moved into number 10 Downing Street after a triumphant election victory. Blair spread his message throughout Europe, not by fighting against the current of globalization, but flowing with it. Going the third way brought the Social Democrats back to power. And today, the Conservative Tories have been back in power for some time. The Labour Party suffered their second worst defeat ever in the parliamentary elections with only 29% of the vote. A landslide.
The big criticism from within the left, as well as from outside the left, is that the structure of the economy was not reformed. So there was a big build-up of finance capitalism, the domination of the city, a very large build-up of a housing market bubble, and people's real wages stagnated, particularly for the last sort of 6 or 7 years of that Labour government.
This diagnosis sounded familiar to me. The third way leaves behind a few super rich and many losers.
People say we should have regulated the banks more. If we'd have said, we're going to regulate this market very strongly and we're going to damage our competitiveness against Germany and America in financial services, people would have thought we were balmy. But the dilemma is probably we looked too much at people at the bottom end of society, but we were totally relaxed about people earning big money. And what that's turned into is huge inequalities in wages, hedge funds and other areas making huge profits, and people not seeing any benefit from that. And maybe we should have done more there.
Back in Luton, they are no longer the working man's party. The third way led directly into the crisis. Labour appears completely at a loss.
We can't let the economy go. We can't say, well, in 2015, let's just draw a veil over all that, because it is the single biggest weapon that this government have got to use against us. Last government maxed out on their credit card. Don't give the keys back to the driver who drove the car into the ditch. This is potent stuff, and I'm afraid we've not got the same snappy one-liners to say on the doorstep.
What makes things more difficult is the Labour Party's way back to the workers has been obstructed. There are hardly any left.
There was a very big reduction in industrial and manufacturing jobs under Labour. Actually, they declined faster under Labour than they had done in the 18 years previously, the Conservative government. And that core vote disappeared or shrunk. And Labour was also seen to have drifted away, I think, from its blue-collar base.
Secret dealings with the economy, disregard for the ordinary voter. The German SPD is also well acquainted with these accusations. Back to campaigner Axel Schäfer. His mission is to get back in touch with the ordinary folk. The SPD's new strategy is that their candidates go from door to door like vacuum salesmen. Schäfer's message is simple. Vote for me. The most important thing is being invited in. Thank you. Good afternoon. We're from the SPD, a little present to remind you of the upcoming election. Thank you. It's a small flyer. Okay, and that's me. A little present from the SPD to remind you of the upcoming election. Hang on. That's me. So here you are. Don't forget, 22nd of September. And that's me. Yes, I've seen you in the paper. Thank you. All the best. You won't forget 22nd of September, right? So going door to door is the best way to approach people. You can't achieve this at an information stand, even less so at an event. We've not been able to think of anything better than personal contact so far. Yes, with your friend there, Steinbruck. But I'll get your first vote, right? Of course. This way is certainly easier. If you get annoyed with others, you can still say, okay, I've met Mr. Schäfer personally, and listen to what he has to say. Social democratic politicians, on the one hand, are very visible during the election campaign. But because the organizational base is gone, and the old environment and surrounding communities no longer exist, the personal connection with the voters has gone. You cannot make up for all that with campaigners going from door to door, who ordinary citizens and even party members hardly recognize. So my initial assessment? The German SPD and British Labour Party have lost their traditional identity to a large extent. For the parties themselves, the third way has led to a dead end. Next up, how have the Social Democrats favored in a country which practically has social democracy in its DNA, as opposed to Germany or Great Britain? I head for Sweden. When I think of Sweden, I think of Scandinavian serenity, IKEA, Elks, and the Astrid Lindgren idol. Here the world appears to still be in order. Even for social democracy, Sweden is the shining example for all social democrats. And when you drive through Stockholm, you can see why. Sweden is one of the richest countries in the world. Rich and social democratic? How does that work? In Swedish Parliament, I meet Ardalan Shekarabi, member of the SAP, the Swedish Social Democratic Party. The first thing I want to know is what social democracy actually means in Sweden.
Den svenska modellen bygger på egentligen tre benar.
Well, the Swedish model is built on three cornerstones.
En arbetsmarknad som är reglerad.
A regulated labor market with strong unions.
Är starka.
A large, all-encompassing social welfare state, which is financed by everyone, and a political environment in which the economy is protected from too much governmental influence.
Där den skyddas delvis från allt för mycket statlig inblandning.
Sweden has always detested a capitalist dog-eat-dog society. The social welfare state, on the other hand, stands for social security. We found a welfare state model that not only included the working class, but also the growing middle class, so that welfare was not only directed at supporting the poor. It encompassed all groups, including the middle class.
Har varit inriktad på att ge ett generellt stöd till alla och inkludera breda folkgrupper, inklusive medelklass.
This has meant high taxes ever since. In 1954, an astounded Mr. Anderson had to accept a lesson from the Social Democrats, in spite of his greatest dream to finally live without taxes.
Statt upp, herr Andersson, statt upp och stå på egna ben. Ni är befriad från skatter. Ni står vid sidan om samhället.
Du kan få något kaffe, det finns vatten.
Vatten? Det stiger vatten.
Vi var med och betalade till skolan.
Ett konto är spärrat. Herr Andersson står ju på egna ben och betalar ju ingen skatt.
Ingen skatt, ingen skatt, ingen skatt.
Vakna, Gustav, vakna. Är det med dig?
Oj, jag drömde att vi stod på egna ben.
På egna ben, vad menar du?
Vi betalar inga skatter.
A film from happier times. Then, even in the model country of social democracy, the party has lost its voters. In 2010, only 30% voted for the SAP, the worst result since the First World War. I believe that a social democratic party needs to solve the problem of unemployment. Many voters felt that we didn't do this while we were in power, and that was justified criticism. For several years, Sweden has now been fighting with an unemployment level of 8%. Youth unemployment has even risen up to 25%. I'm traveling with Ardalan Shekarabi to Uppsala, to a political event of the SAP on educational policy. What were the reasons for the devastating election defeat? The main representatives trying to explain. I think they lacked confidence. They didn't pursue their social democratic decisions and values. They didn't get through to the voters in the way they should have. The Conservatives communicated better. That was the reason why we failed. We simply didn't have coherent arguments. The conservative opposition led by Prime Minister Reinvents. His strategy was adaptation.
Det liberal-konservativa partiet I Sverige, Moderaterna, har förändrats radikalt.
The Liberal Conservative Party has changed radically in the last 10 years. They use old social democratic slogans and copy our old election posters.
Socialdemokraternas gamla valaffischer.
They even call themselves the New Labour Party.
För att kopiera det socialdemokratiska arbetarpartiet.
They do that on every level, even handing out flowers, the Social Democrats' core discipline. The Conservatives these days have caught up.
Men det är klart att om man tittar på den moderata strategin.
The Conservative strategy is directed at the 2/3 of the population who are doing well, who have work and decent pay. These people have more money in their purses now. But it is at the expense of the population who are not doing as well.
De har fått mer pengar I plånboken, har fått det bättre ekonomiskt på bekostnad av grupper som har det sämre.
I conclude, in Sweden the Conservatives rule with a light version of social democratic policy. The actual social democrats are no longer needed.
Så att I någon mening kan man säga att Socialdemokraterna har segrat.
You could say that social democracy has prevailed and created free individuals. But those perhaps do not always value the collective organizations that are responsible. And that is a big strategic dilemma for the social democratic parties in all of Europe. Conservative with a splash of social democracy? I know this from Germany and Great Britain.
I think this is a lesson for the whole of Europe of the right detoxifying their brand. I think this happened all over Europe, but Cameron very successfully. From an anti-environmentalist party to vote blue, go green. From an anti-national minimum wage party suddenly embracing the minimum wage. A very, very big change, and a change that appealed to people on the centre ground who blamed us for the financial crisis.
Germany, Great Britain and Sweden. In all three countries, the third way has led the Social Democrats off track, leaving the way to power clear for the Conservatives. Now we're off to France, where the Socialists were elected because they explicitly promised an alternative. François Hollande has succeeded in mobilizing the masses for his Parti Socialiste and naming himself as the nation's savior. This is how he won the election.
L'enjeu de cette campagne, c'est la France. Une France du travail, du mérite, de l'effort, de l'initiative, de l'entreprise, de la diversité. Rassemblons-nous. Le redressement, c'est maintenant. La justice, c'est maintenant. L'espérance, c'est maintenant. La République, c'est maintenant. Le changement, c'est maintenant. Vive la République et vive la France.
I'm on my way to the small town of Marmande in the south of France. How close are the socialists here in the provinces to the people? These common people who indeed mainly voted left. I meet Matteo, the Parti Socialiste MP in the National Assembly for this constituency.
La victoire de François Hollande en 2012 et ensuite
François Hollande's victory in the 2012 elections arose out of a desire for change,
Elle est due aussi au bilan
and also from what happened previously, including Nicolas Sarkozy's accomplishments.
de Nicolas Sarkozy, avec sa manière d'être.
After his extremely aggressive politics, the French people wanted to open up a new chapter in favor of more equilibrium and realism.
Plus apaisé.
They finally wanted to have faith again.
De se sentir à nouveau en confiance.
Whatever expectations Hollande inspired in the voters, he has disappointed them. his popularity has decreased rapidly. The accusation is he has done nothing about the crisis. François Hollande consciously made only modest promises during his election campaign. He said, "I only make promises I can keep." But even that was too difficult. And it caused even more disappointment as a result. In truth, Hollande faces a dilemma. He promised to get a grip on the unemployment situation in 2013. That failed. Now experts, even amongst the socialists, are demanding exactly what he wanted to avoid, namely economy-friendly reforms like in Germany. Hollande is hesitant, and that has disastrous consequences. People understand that efforts have to be made, that times are hard, but they cannot forgive if it's unclear what the direction is and why these efforts are necessary. And then they get the impression that there are only quarrels and back and forth. I accompany Matthias Ficker to a party meeting in his Marmont constituency.
Ça va? Je sais pas à qui je vais dire bonjour. Bonjour. Ça va?
Oui, ça va, merci.
Oui, merci d'être là. Bon, c'est...
Thank you for coming.
Bonjour. Ça va?
Ouais, toi aussi?
Oui, très bien. Bonjour. Ça va?
Bah oui, ça va bien.
Bon, bonjour. Ça va bien?
Despite the good relationship with the local candidates, Paris is far away, and the party leadership is preoccupied with itself and internal power struggles.
Comme ça, tout le monde est réveillé?
Is everyone awake now?
François Donis souhaite poser une question.
François would like to ask some questions.
Par Bristol.
On nous parle de réforme fiscale.
Everyone is talking about the tax reform, but we here at the base don't understand anything. There was a time when the Parti Socialiste would organize a party meeting whenever there was a problem. Why can't the party also have a meeting on the tax policy, so that we can finally understand what our representatives want to do? Between you and me, and perhaps I shouldn't say this on a camera, but the MPs also don't always understand everything, and are trying to figure it out as best they can. But then we could also decipher this together. Okay, it's not comforting, but it's the truth. And that's why I'm saying this. Now we're in power. I think it's time to finally put an end to cronyism and stand together behind Hollande. I'm fed up with hearing ever new opinions from various ministers on television. This doesn't help us move forward, and we don't understand anything. To address your point about collusive behavior, yes, the various trends don't make sense anymore. And to those who are unhappy, to be honest, a minister has many other things to do in his life, and he is free to do them. As Jean-Pierre Chevènement says, a minister shuts his trap or resigns. I think this should be written on quite a few office doors. In January, after much hesitation, President Hollande finally reacted and announced reforms. The measures sound familiar: tax rebates for businesses, a more flexible labor market, and budget cuts.
Engager une bataille. Ouvrir une nouvelle étape. Il ne s'agit pas de changer de chemin. Il s'agit d'aller plus vite, d'aller plus loin, d'accélérer, d'approfondir.
Really? The fresh start sounds more like a change of policy along the lines of the German Agenda 2010. Peter Hartz, who is responsible for the German Hartz IV laws, was even received at the Élysée Palace. This reorientation will also cost the French socialists a lot of trust. The consequences can be seen in their European sister parties, be it in Germany, Great Britain, or Sweden. The problem is globalization, and the economic crisis appear to allow no option than to give up social standards. The core of the social democratic identity is fading away.
Il y a une pression très forte par la mondialisation.
Due to globalization and the common dogma in Europe, there is great pressure to reduce deficits and not to spend too much public money.
À limiter les déficits, à ne pas trop dépenser d'argent public. Et puis, il y a une autre pression.
But the left is under further pressure.
Historiquement, c'est...
For many people, they symbolize social security, a strong state, a strong public sector, everything that is very expensive today.
Le service public, toute chose qui coûte cher aujourd'hui. Donc c'est un double.
It's a double-sided vice which is contracting. So the left ends up in an impossible situation.
Le témoignage direct.
Election results everywhere are showing this.
Historique dans laquelle la gauche se trouve aujourd'hui.
Based on the 4 countries, my conclusion so far is sobering. When the Social Democrats are in power, they adapt to the mainstream, become more removed from the basic ideals, and thus become considered superfluous by many. Does this have to be the case? I set my hopes in a country that has been worse hit by the crisis and traditionally is different from the rest of Europe. Italy. Here, an iridescent and colorful left was once a powerful opposition to the Christian Democrats. That was a long time ago, but there is hope once more. Ancient backdrops, the Vatican, Dolce Vita, pizza, pasta, and Tuscany. Everyone knows the Italian cliches. But one has been added in the last few years. Silvio Berlusconi. He stands for Italian politics mentality and confusion like no other, to the dismay of many Italians. But even here, the Social Democrats won the last election with Enrico Letta from the Partito Democratico as the new prime minister. Hope for a new left-wing beginning in Italian politics. In Rome, I meet MP Matteo Orfini. His party, the Partito Democratico, was founded only in 2008 from the most diverse political factions.
C'è la tradizione comunista, la tradizione socialista.
There is a communist tradition, a socialist tradition, the Catholic People's Democratic tradition, and experience from various citizens' movements. Many realities form this party. We are, however, still struggling to create an amalgam of all these different cultures. Nevertheless, this party could be a great chance for the country. So a grand coalition within a party? There is little evidence of a left or social democratic profile. They stand for everything and for nothing.
Il Partito Democratico tutela la salute come fondamentale diritto dell'individuo e interesse della collettività. Il Partito Democratico tutela il paesaggio e il patrimonio storico e artistico della nazione. Il Partito Democratico promuove lo sviluppo della cultura e la ricerca scientifica e tecnica. Il Partito Democratico è fondato sul lavoro. PD, democratici per Costituzione.
Yet the Partito Democratico formed a grand coalition with Berlusconi's party, with its arch enemy of all people, making a social democratic policy even less likely.
Cosa avete detto al signor Berlusconi?
vi ha dato degli impegni sulle nuove riforme in Italia? Siete più rassicurata?
We did it for an obvious reason. The election result did not allow any other majority. So there are only two possibilities, either re-elections with probably the same result or a grand coalition with Berlusconi. Following Berlusconi's conviction, the Partito Democratico rules in a coalition with the Centre Party and a new party which split from Berlusconi called New Centre Right. The Partito Democratico's profile is as vague as the expectations of the voters are diverse. I accompany Matteo Orfini to his meet and greet with senior citizens in his Rome constituency. This woman is complaining about her pension, you see? You're right. How much did you get? I get 1 million. A million? A million euros? Or lira? Lira. 1,000 euros. 1,000 euros. 1 million. That would be nice. You have to pay rent. You pay everything. Light, gas, telephone, everything. Even the bus pass. I don't have a large apartment. One room, kitchen, hallway, bathroom. You rent? I rent. We can't manage the immigration problem in Italy any longer. There are too many. These are problems that affect us in the Mediterranean, as Italians and Spanish. Europe can't just speak about the 3% debt restriction. It also has to consider our social problems that we simply can't get under control.
Deve pensare pure a questi problemi sociali che questi paesi affrontano e non ce la facciamo affrontare.
The Partito Democratico is a melting pot for everyone who is looking for a somewhat different kind of politics. I think the party's main problem is that it hasn't fundamentally decided what it should be and which areas of society it would like to represent. So also in Italy, the Social Democrats are looking for their mission. This is quite simple: be the opposite of Berlusconi. No scandals, no corruption. However, several left-wing politicians come from the hated political establishment and hence lack credibility. This explains the meteoric rise of former comedian Beppe Grillo, who, with his protest against the political establishment, was able to gain 25% of the votes in the parliamentary election right out of the gate.
Depositiamo nel più grande deposito di liquidi avariati del nostro Parlamento la dose di cozze, sperando che si schiodino di lì nell'arco dei secoli. Signori, è cominciato un nuovo corso. Via le cozze, via le cozze.
Qualche tempo fa
A while ago, there was an opinion poll that investigated the credibility of the country's various institutions: judges, newspapers, the president, parliament, and parties. The pollsters also included the mafia, which of course is unusual. The politicians were found to be less popular than the mafia. So, that's the feeling.
Questo è il sentimento.
The worst possible prerequisites. And already in February, the next change had taken place. Matteo Renzi, the Partito Democratico's young shooting star, replaced Enrico Letta as prime minister. Renzi stands for a new generation, unencumbered by the sins of the past. Perhaps he can provide hope. Perhaps he will only intensify the political chaos in Italy. The end is open. There is also hope for a better future for Social Democrats in all of the other countries. But what are their goals? What is their vision? I got only bashful answers.
For
a long time, the left had clear goals, namely defending the working class, as they didn't have any social benefits, and the rebuilding of the welfare state. Today, it's very difficult to say in one sentence what the aims of the left wing are. At the moment, there isn't a politician with a vision that includes all European left-wing movements. There are also no philosophers or thinkers who have the explanations. We therefore urgently need to bundle all intellectual and political powers in order to work on a new message for the left. It's not about winning elections. It's also about changing society. And social democracy doesn't know what to do after an election victory. There is actually a resounding cry for a vision, and particularly with the social democratic parties. Incidentally, throughout Europe, this desire is particularly pronounced. That's because they have always regarded themselves as a movement and a party that doesn't only stand for a good today that they want to manage, but for a better tomorrow. But in our society, the level of education has risen considerably, and with it, the ability of people to judge concepts for themselves. A utopian concept for the future is a concept that people believe in nevertheless. However, today, we don't believe politicians anymore who say, I have an idea of how tomorrow will be, and will try to make this happen. But does the average citizen even need a vision? Or is it more like what SPD icon Helmut Schmidt said? Whoever has visions should go to a doctor.
I mean, the people that are complaining about this, I think, are probably mainly journalists and intellectuals. They're the people who are interested in vision. I think ordinary voters judge in a very pragmatic way as to who they think will be able to look after their interests and deliver the things that they say they will deliver.
A challenge faced by the SPD. The German electoral evening. Axel Schäfer is on his way to the Bochum town hall. The SPD election forecasts were disastrous. Has Schäfer defended his direct mandate? The tension is high. Where is that? Which district?
Yeah, okay.
The valiant campaigning in Bochum has paid off. Axel Schäfer is re-elected with 44% of the vote. Nationwide, however, the SPD's election campaign strategy has yielded poor results, with 26%, their second worst ever result. Only 4 years previously was it worse. Despite the new Grand Coalition and government participation, the Social Democrats remain in low spirits. What is the way forward? I finally asked politicians and experts how European social democracy will find its way back to its former strength in the long term. We're facing a dramatic situation now, and it's precisely because of this that we need the left. But then the left has to be left. There were years when we were scared of saying the word left. Like in other countries, we looked for adjectives or called ourselves the new center. That's why it's time to rediscover the beauty of this word. the beauty of this ideal and the duty to fight for a more just world.
But also, really importantly, pluralism. Social democracy has to be open to the ideas and arguments of other traditions and parties, liberal, green, and so on. It's only when you do that that you're able to build a strong electoral coalition. And that's why the centre-right has been successful. Centre-right parties have always been more porous, more open, more engaged with other traditions, and social democratic parties have got to learn to do the same. If you're just camped on your own ground, with your own flag, with your own resources, you don't win.
I've reached the end of my journey, having discovered neither new perspectives nor a ray of hope. The Social Democrats' dilemma is the same everywhere. As a result of the economic crisis and globalization, the scope has become ever smaller. European social democracy has adapted, and its movement has become unclear. They've given up the claim to be a real alternative. It is in no way certain whether social democracy will continue to exist. There is no absolute security that a movement, a party, or a political family will exist forever.
Politiska rörelser kan uppstå och försvinna.
Political movements come and go. Another movement will rise up to advocate for justice and solidarity. Nothing is taken for granted.